The oldest surviving photograph. View from the window at Le Gras. It was taken in the late 1820s by photographic pioneer and inventor Joseph Nicephore Niepce. Recorded on a bitumen-coated pewter plate, the image is the oldest known surviving photograph of a real-world scene. But much like a film negative, in its raw form, the photograph isn't much of a view. After rediscovering the image in 1952, historian Helmut Gernsheim took a closer look, and using reference images from the original location, Gernsheim set to work retouching and enhancing the image. Take another look, it may be clearer now. And what if you were to look even closer? And suddenly, the whole image is revealed. When we take a photograph, we freeze time and capture a memory. But occasionally, when we look closer at that beautiful view, or the happy bride and groom on their wedding day, or the smiles of parents witnessing a baby's first steps, we may find that these treasured memories aren't the only things we've captured. The construction of Raynham Hall in Norfolk, England began in 1619. Hailed as the first of its kind due to its blend of Italian and Dutch architecture, the hall was completed in 1637 and was to be the home of the wealthy landowner, politician and Sheriff of Norfolk, Sir Roger Townshend. However, following Sir Roger's death at the age of 41 in the same year, the home was passed down to his eldest son and successor, also named Sir Roger Townshend. The hall remains the residence of the Townshend family to this day, but it's in the 1700s, when the hall was occupied by Charles Townshend, that our story takes root. English aristocrat and sister to the future first Prime Minister of England, Dorothy Walpole, married Charles Townshend in 1713. After allegations of adultery, rumours began to spread that Lady Dorothy Townshend, as she became known, had been locked away in Raynham Hall as punishment, and in 1726, at the age of 40, she reportedly died as a result of smallpox. Although allegedly no formal cause of death has ever been confirmed, leading some to suspect foul play. Over 100 years later, sightings began of a female ghost at Raynham Hall, and based on the colour of her dress, she was dubbed the Brown Lady. And in 1926, 200 years after Lady Dorothy Townshend's death, the ghost's identity was seemingly uncovered after the son of Lady Gladys Townshend stated he'd seen a ghost with a friend and pointed his mother to a portrait of Lady Dorothy, stating that was the woman he'd seen. And 10 years later, the world would finally be introduced to the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall. In September 1936, photographer Captain Hubert C. Provand and his assistant Indra Shearer were photographing various rooms and the grounds of Raynham Hall. Whilst photographing the main staircase, Shearer reportedly witnessed a mist resembling a female figure descending the staircase. Astonished by what he saw, Shearer immediately demanded Captain Provand to take a photo of the staircase in an attempt to document what he was witnessing. And when the photograph was developed, both men were astonished. The photograph was later featured in an article on the 26th of December 1936 by the popular magazine Country Life, along with a feature on spirit photos with Harry Price, a paranormal investigator famous at the time for uncovering fraudulent mediums and psychics and debunking paranormal activity. As a result of the article, believers and skeptics began debating the authenticity of the photo and the experiences of the two men at Raynham Hall. The Society for Psychical Research carried out an investigation into the photograph and events surrounding it, noting issues and inconsistencies with the men's stories, specifically regarding the logistics of focusing and operating the camera in such a limited time, and Provan's own admission that the camera bellows were faulty and at risk of light leak. Other skeptics would also suggest similar photographic tricks ranging from double exposure, superimposed images of the Virgin Mary and grease on the lens to debunk and uncover the truth behind the photo of the Brown Lady. However, both Captain Provand and Indra Shearer consistently denied faking the image. In April 1870, a small group of tourists heading to the site of the Battle of Marathon in Greece found themselves hostage in the hands of Greek brigands. Among them was a man named Frederick Viner. For the safe return of their loved ones, the brigands demanded from the families of the group a ransom of 1 million drachma, at the time equating to roughly £32,000. Or £3.5 million in today's currency. One of the group, Jocelyn Pennington, the 5th Baron of Muncaster, was released from captivity to raise the ransom, which he was successful in doing. However, after refusal by the Greek government to grant the brigands amnesty, the Greek army attempted to rescue the hostages, all of whom were slaughtered by their captors in the ensuing panic. The kidnapping and subsequent events, later dubbed the De Lacy murders, were heavily criticised by the British government and Queen Victoria, who publicly spoke out against the Greek government. But closer to home, this did nothing to soothe those left in mourning at the loss of their loved ones. On the suggestion of Lady Mary Viner, mother of Frederick Viner, the ransom money gathered would be put to use to honour the memory of those fallen. And as a result, 2 churches were erected. St Mary's Church in Studley Royal, North Yorkshire, and the Church of Christ Consular in Skelton-cum-Newby, North Yorkshire. And it is in Skelton-cum-Newby in 1963 where Reverend K. F. Lords received an unknown and unexpected visitor. Whilst photographing the altar inside the church, Reverend Lords stated that he never saw anything unusual, but upon processing the photographs, it appears he'd captured something very out of the ordinary. Agreed by most to resemble a 16th century monk, the Newby Spectre appears around 8 foot tall, dressed in dark robes, and has a terrifyingly distorted face, believed by some to be a shroud often worn by those with leprosy to hide their unsettling appearance. Despite no historical evidence to suggest monks ever resided in the area, and no paranormal occurrences ever reported at what is considered to be a relatively young church by English standards, Reverend Lords insisted that the photo was 100% genuine and that no one was present at the time the photo was taken. While skeptics offer similar hoax techniques used to explain the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall, investigations by several photographic experts, including the BBC in the 1970s, have failed to conclude on the photograph's overall authenticity. However, many have agreed that neither the photograph or negative had been tampered with. Constructed in the early 1340s, St Mary's Guildhall in Coventry has had a colourful history. Initially serving as the headquarters for the Merchant Guild of St Mary, the Guildhall has seen many uses, including the town armoury, treasury, various offices for the city council, and at one point operated as a soup kitchen. Playing host to all walks of life from royalty to the homeless and destitute in its 680-year history, it is no surprise that countless ghost sightings and stories of hauntings occur here even to this day. The Guildhall now acts as a private hire venue for weddings, events, meetings and a cafe, and in January of 1985, during one of these private events, an unexpected guest arrived. On the 22nd of January 1985, the Coventry Freemen's Association were hosting a private dinner event. During their meal, the guests all stood up and bowed their heads in prayer, and the event photographer for the evening took the opportunity to capture the moment. Soon after the event, the photographs were developed, and members of the Coventry Freemen's Association received copies from the photographer, but upon closer inspection by several of the attendees, it became apparent that an uninvited guest had made an appearance. The figure, apparently dressed in monk's robes and a cowl, appears to be bowing its head in prayer, along with the other guests. The figure only appeared in one photo, and no guest at the event recalled ever seeing a monk or any guest dressed as a monk, and those standing closest to the figure were adamant that no one of the description was standing in that spot at the time of the dinner prayer. Skeptics have put forward suggestions that the monk is nothing more than a guest in costume, or even a statue, and that the incident was staged. And with the photographer later explaining that he had set the camera for a slightly longer exposure than normal due to the dim conditions in the venue at the time, some have speculated that the monk is nothing more than a guest who had moved during the long exposure, causing motion blur and the illusion of a figure. However, several guests stated no one was standing there at all at the time the photo was taken, and no statues or sculptures were present. And assuming the negatives had not been doctored in any way, it is this fact alone that leads the biggest argument towards the overall authenticity of the photograph. In 1616, construction began on a new home for Anne of Denmark, the wife of King James I. Designed by famed architect Inigo Jones, Queen's House in Greenwich, London was completed in 1635 and subsequently made history as the first purposely built classical building in Britain. Anne of Denmark would unfortunately never live to see the building's completion, and as a result, Queen's House would later become the residence of Henrietta Maria of France, the wife of King Charles I. But following the start of the English Civil War just 7 years later, the house would remain empty as Henrietta, despite her efforts to remain in England with her husband, in 1646 would eventually take refuge in France before finally returning to England in 1660, 9 years after the end of the English Civil War. Queen's House has seen many different uses since Henrietta Maria resided there, and it now serves as an art gallery. And despite various restoration projects over its 384-year history, the house has maintained many of its original features, one of which is the first example of centrally unsupported helical stairs in England, famously known as the Tulip stairs. And it's here in 1966 that a Canadian couple visiting London would unknowingly make their own mark in history. Having seen photos of the Tulip staircase in magazines, retired Reverend R.W. Hardy and his wife decided to visit Queen's house in the hope of seeing and photographing the staircase for themselves. On the day, Hardy wished to photograph the staircase from the top looking down, but due to being cordoned off, preventing any persons from ascending the stairs, he was forced to photograph the staircase from the bottom. The photographs remained on Hardy's camera until he returned home to Canada, but upon developing the film, Reverend Hardy and his wife had captured more than just the interesting and iconic staircase. Appearing as a cloaked figure, seemingly dragging itself up the stairs, the Tulip Stairs ghost has become one of the most iconic ghost photographs of the last 100 years, even prompting a formal investigation at the house from the oldest psychical research group in the world, the Ghost Club, the following year. Despite their investigation proving inconclusive and having recorded no paranormal evidence, Reverend Hardy remained adamant that the staircase was completely empty when the photograph was taken due to the cordon that had been in place. And subsequent inspection of the image soon after development yielded no evidence of a hoax. And whilst no other ghosts have been captured on film since, visitors and staff have reported paranormal experiences, most recently of an unidentified female figure dressed in a white or grey dress. Could it be Henrietta Maria finally returned to Queen's house after her death in 1669? Or perhaps her predecessor, Anne of Denmark, was able to see her home completed after all.